For this podcast, I have someone I really admire. She is just an amazing human being, a friend and a colleague, and I'm just honored to know Bea Gallegos. She is a survivor, a perseverer, and she has a very difficult job of running the shelter in Las Vegas, New Mexico. But she does it with her whole heart, with great ethics, and she does amazing rehabilitation with the dogs she cares for. She is the manager of a very small rural shelter in Las Vegas, New Mexico called the Las Vegas Animal Care Center. She's been managing the shelter for a little over a year and a half. Before that, she was working at the shelter when it was run by a nonprofit, and we met there, and we both share a love of working with fearful and feral dogs. And Bea does an amazing job rehabilitating these dogs in a very tough shelter environment. The rural shelters in New Mexico are often underfunded, uncared about, and Bea is trying to change that. She's trying to improve the shelter. Bea has had to start from the ground up, working in the shelter and getting it to function, being run by the city. So in this podcast, we talk a little bit about the shelter environment and the challenges she has to face, but we're also going to talk about feral dogs and how she starts to rehabilitate them in the shelter environment and use her dog OG as an example for that. So please listen in. I'm your host, Julie Hart. If you guys would, if you enjoy my podcast, please hit the follow and like buttons. I appreciate the show of support, and I hope that you will continue to listen to my podcast. Some learning opportunities that I have about fearful and feral dogs are on my website at fearfuldogtraining.com or feraldogtraining.com. Bea and I are working together actually on Friday. We're going to host the Fearful Feral Dog Workshop at the shelter run by Canine Human Relationship Institute. And I look forward to this workshop every year. This year I'm teaching it, and I'm super excited to do that. I've been working hard on some new material and how to explain concepts, and I hope everyone that's coming will have a fantastic time. Please check into my website and my Facebook page if you want to learn more about this workshop, as we hope to offer it again and also offer it online. Thank you. So I wanted to welcome Bea Gallegos to the podcast today. I've worked with Bea, I think 5 years now, Bea.
Yeah, I think it's been about 5.
She's worked at the shelter in Las Vegas, New Mexico, not Nevada, for 5 years. And we got started working together with a large hoarding case where we both worked on rehabbing the fearful and feral dogs. I don't know, Bea just has whatever that special something is, in my opinion, with the dogs. You can just see it when you watch her. She's gonna start blushing maybe, but
Don't look at me.
especially with the fearful and feral dogs. So we've worked together a lot, and I go up to the shelter, I don't know, once every 2 months or something, and take a look at dogs or work with dogs. And so we stay in touch, and then we also work together on supporting the shelter through Friends of San Miguel County Animals, which is a nonprofit that helps support the shelter, and why that's needed we'll get into later. Thanks for joining me, Bea. Taking time.
Thank you for having me.
Do you want to say how old you are, first of all?
Sure. Yeah, I am 26.
Yeah.
Just turned 26 in December.
And that blows my mind because I forget Bea is in her 20s because she feels like she's about 40 to me most of the time. And you guys will probably see why too here in a minute. But the composure and the calmness that she has for a 26-year-old just constantly amazes me, because I was not like that when I was 26.
It's all on the outside. Inside, I'm like, what the heck is going on?
You just hide it well. But the dogs would tell. The dogs would tell.
Yep.
So You can't hide it too much. So I wanted Bea to kind of share her story about how she ended up managing the shelter. It was kind of a rocky road, and probably still is to some respects. Um, for everyone that doesn't know, New Mexico often rates absolute last in the 50 states for animal welfare. They look at things like shelter conditions, animal welfare laws, enforcement of laws, and all that to get the amount. And yes, New Mexico is in the United States. It's not in Mexico, just for everyone that may not know. When I moved here, I was absolutely floored by the rural shelters and what they had to deal with. So we'll get into a little bit of that too. But first, tell me how you ended up where you are in that chair right now.
Well, to make a really long story short, I worked for a nonprofit who ran the shelter for about 4 years. And every so often, the government has to do what's called an RFP, a request for proposals, for the entity who was taking on the shelter. And so there was a lot of issues between the city entity and the nonprofit who was running the shelter. And so the nonprofit chose not to respond to the last RFP that the city put out. Basically, I was thinking, holy moly, nobody is going to know what to do. Those animals are going to be just euthanized, weekly, or who knows what's going to happen. There was nobody with the knowledge base to run a shelter.
Yeah.
And so I saw that the position opened up for the shelter manager and I applied for it. Here I am, wondering what the heck I'm doing, but I'm almost 2 years in and we're moving along. It's been a huge adjustment to get used to working with a nonprofit versus working with a government entity. There's a lot of different processes and things move really slow. And so that's been a huge struggle. That's how I ended up here.
So how did you get into like animal welfare to begin with? What made you say, I want to work at a shelter?
Well, I had a few different jobs. I was like a bank teller. I had worked, in high school, daylight donuts and like things like that.
Yeah.
When I was working at the bank, I had just graduated from high school, kind of just figuring out what I wanted to do. And I wanted to work. I wanted to make money. That was kind of the goal at that point. I didn't enjoy it. I loved getting to know customers and things like that, but it was just, I didn't feel like I was contributing to society very much. And as I started thinking about it, I really wanted to be a vet. And so I enrolled in an online vet tech program and I was doing that. I was also a really bad teller. I would always come up either over money on my drawer or under by a little bit. And so I ended up, you get like 3 strikes and you're out.
Right.
And I hit my 3 strikes and I was like, you know what? Yeah, this is not the job for me. And I think I was over $20 on my drawer the last time. And I was like, guys, I can't keep doing this. Like, just fire me. It's okay.
Yeah.
So I did. I resigned and decided to just take on, that vet tech program full time. And it was all online, so it was really easy to do. And from there, I saw that the animal shelter was hiring a full-time position. And I thought, well, I want to be a vet. It might be a good way to get my foot in the door or at least get some experience working with animals or doing something because there's not a lot in this area. Started there. When I started, we had the huge hoarding case and the shelter was full with somewhere between 20 to 25 dogs from that case.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just so emotionally broken down and they wouldn't move. They wouldn't do anything. And it was not dogs I had ever seen before.
Yeah.
And from there, I kind of realized there's so much more to animal care than just, medical care or basic feeding them every day and things like that. So I really fell in love with the behavior side of things and rehabilitating those dogs. And so I kind of threw the vet tech thing out the window and kind of just dove into the training and the behavior aspect.
That case actually gave both of us a really big opportunity, I think, because they were on a court hold, so they couldn't be euthanized or transferred out or anything like that. So those dogs were there for, I think, 9 months. They gave us the opportunity to really work with them and learn about how to help those dogs. So I think for both of us, that was like a big, you know,
Yeah,
change.
it was really interesting. And at that point, I think, having dogs that are like that, the shelter was euthanizing dogs like that because there was no understanding of how to help dogs like that or what to do with them even. I mean, who's going to take a dog home that just wants to sit in the corner all day and is never going to want to interact with people? And that was the big question when I started was what happens to these dogs when this whole court hold is over and, they're released into custody in the animal shelter officially, what happens to them? And that kind of panicked me a little bit being new to working in an animal shelter. The thought of just euthanizing 26 dogs once they were off of this hold was kind of horrific, honestly. So it was really good that we found you and we found Nelson and we were able to learn how to rehabilitate these dogs. And from there, I mean, it's helped probably hundreds by now.
I mean, believe me, I felt that reality as well, I mean, I knew like the whole situation wasn't my fault and all of that, right? We didn't create the way those dogs were, but I kind of felt once I met them, of course, and they're really pretty sweet, except for those puppies, which ended up being great dogs. You get attached to them and you want to help them if you can and avoid, what may happen to them. I know I've heard from other people that some shelters intake feral dogs and just euthanize them right away. They don't even go on like their books.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some other city shelters here that don't rehabilitate them. And granted, I can understand. I mean, that's kind of the reality of what you do, especially and also in rescue. You only have so many resources, and like, how do you allocate those resources to the dogs that you think you can help the most? Luckily, with those dogs, and also since then, I've taken quite a few dogs from up there that needed some help, and now some people in the rescue I volunteer for down here also know how to help them. So it's working out pretty well, and it does take a long time. So, again, time is a resource too. Let's talk about, I don't think people realize what the shelters are like in New Mexico. I haven't been to a lot of them. I've been to a couple of the rural shelters. For example, I know like your county covers, what is it, 4,100 and some square miles.
It's pretty big.
And you have how many animal control officers right now?
One for the county and one for the city.
Wow, so that's a lot of acreage for one person for the county.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so bad for the county officer. Sometimes he's on one side of the county, and he gets a call for a dog fight, an hour and a half away. And he
Yeah,
has to make that drive. By the time he gets out there, this dog that bit somebody's gone.
right.
And so, there's not really anything he can do about it. They can't find the dog, and people get mad at him because he doesn't do his job. There's only so much you can do when you can't find the dog because it took you an hour to get there.
Yeah, there's no transporters like in Star Trek, like he can't magically just transport to the other side of the county.
No, but it'd be nice, but not possible.
I think I did some research and I think there was like 20,000 people in the county. Is that right?
27.
27. The year that I figured out how many animals the shelter took in, it was one animal for every 21 people in the county every year. And if you think about that, that's a lot of animals per capita. Like some more affluent counties where I used to live do like one animal every 300 and some people. And they have so much more funding and resources and a gorgeous building and all this stuff. But you have what, a shelter that, how many runs do you guys have? 30?
31.
31. And then a cat room or cat little building with heat, air conditioning. Because we don't want to forget the cats. Like I think we're both more oriented towards the dogs, but I love cats. I just don't rehab cats.
Well,
I mean,
I always laugh. The difference between rehabbing a feral dog and a feral cat is dogs are very upfront about what they're gonna do, and cats, I mean, if you're gonna get bitten, by a feral dog, it's usually going to be pretty quick, and then they're going to be like, okay, I'm done. They're not going to hold on. Cats are going to climb your arm, they're going to climb your face, and they're going to hold on, and they don't stop. Like it's they're crazy. So yeah, I don't touch feral cats. Not the same way.
You know, kind of an offshoot. I got bit by a feral kitten when I was like 5. I was in my uncle's barn and he had some barn cat that had kittens. And I went to just pick up the kitten like a 5-year-old would do. And that thing, I remember it to this day, bit my hand and it would not let go. And
Yeah,
I was so worried to tell my parents because I was afraid I'd get in trouble. I guess I didn't get an infection.
thankfully.
But I'm like, yeah, I probably should have mentioned I got bit by a cat. Yeah, that taught me real quick, like, don't pick up wild cats.
Yeah.
Well, and you guys have, like, there's a feral cat population, and where do you guys get most of your cats from?
Most of our cats come from inside city limits. Once in a while, we'll get a call about somebody who found a cat out, in the more rural areas, but it's pretty rare. I mean, I think the nicer cats are the ones we get from out that way. In town, it's a lot of kittens that somebody found in an alley or an injured cat that wandered into somebody's yard. I actually just got a call this week. Somebody was getting evicted and they had 10 cats. And so we, with our 6 kennels, had to figure out how to accommodate all of these cats.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy. But it's a lot of it too is people losing their homes or going to jail, and we have to get.
I forget the exact like poverty rate in the county, but it's over 20%. So of course that's going to affect like people's living situations, their ability to pay for vet care for their animals. And Las Vegas is 2 hours. Well, it's 2 hours from Albuquerque and an hour from Santa Fe. There's 2 vets in town, but of course they're kind of overwhelmed, I think, by just the local population.
Mhm.
And then you guys are surrounded on the north by counties that don't even have animal control. Does Mora have any vets?
No.
So all those people that can afford vet care are all probably coming to Las Vegas.
Yeah. Yep. Typically Las Vegas, and then we have the vet in Sapeo, who's great, but most of our vets they're all older and they've been doing this for years, and so they know what the community they serve is like.
Uh-huh.
So I also notice a big thing is they don't do a lot of diagnostics or things like that as much as you would see in a bigger city with so many more clinics who are way more up to date with the changes in veterinary care. And so that's another big thing we see is a lack of vet care, but also a lack of modern vet care, I guess.
Yeah. When those vets retire, there's going to be a real problem.
Yeah, that's the question we all have is what's going to happen then? Because, I mean, not to be mean, but they're older. They can't do this forever.
Right.
And so that's all of them. That's all 3 of them.
Yeah. I'm sure they want to retire some point in their life.
Exactly.
It's just a reality. It's not like not being mean. I know my vet here retired and I was like, oh no. I found another younger vet, so hopefully she'll stick around for a while. Then also just the shortage of vets, even in Albuquerque, one of the vets we're using for the rescue, all but they had 5 vets on staff and all but one has quit.
Ouch.
Yeah, so like that's gonna affect us
Mhm.
because we were using that vet for rescue, and then like those things snowball and then they affect the shelters.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, it does. It's all interconnected, the whole
yeah.
animal community.
Far as like lack of resources, I mean, I'll just kind of say what I see there, and you can correct me if I'm incorrect. There is a very supportive community there. So, but there's also another side where they don't view animals as like sentient beings, I will say. It kind of goes back to old school, like, oh, animals don't have feelings and can't feel pain. And if you think that way, it's much easier to mistreat them, right? I think if you think that they have feelings and can feel pain and discomfort, maybe you might feel a little guilty about doing that because it's a small area. You don't have like the influx of volunteers, people that want to come and walk dogs and help and things. So it's really just your staff, and your guys were down to what, 2 people for quite a while.
For almost a year and a half, we had about 2 people working here at any given time.
It's like, just to give people a picture of what you're dealing with. It's 2 people dealing with probably 50 dogs and
Between 50 to 65 dogs. And I mean, the cat population changes a lot, but there was a point where I think we had about 25 to 30 cats and about 60 dogs in our care. And, we need weekends.
yeah,
So there were a few days a week where there was only one person taking care of everything.
yeah. Which is like, you don't have time to do training or rehab with that. It's more just like a triage
Yeah,
situation.
it's kind of just make sure things are clean, make sure they're fed, and
Yeah.
for
And
the
then start
best
all
from there.
over again.
Yeah.
The nonprofit has bought you guys a few things that you needed, like surveillance cameras. We bought catch poles, we bought bike gloves, because the procurement through the city is very difficult and can take a long time. And so that's where the organization, the nonprofit, steps in, that we can just purchase those things when you guys need it, and you don't have to wait for the whole procurement process. You get dogs that you need these things for, and maybe cats too, right?
Mhm.
You don't put the bite gloves on for the cats. What is the like a typical day like for you? And I know
I
that may
mean,
not even be possible.
it changes every day. I mean, it changes if there's a spay neuter appointment that we have set up and we need to come in early and drive the dogs there, because the vet is an hour away. Somebody has to go pick them up too. So it always changes, but a normal, we'll say, calm day looks like, staff come in, they walk anybody that needs to be walked, as we do, with our fearful feral dogs. We keep them in crate, or sometimes we have dogs with medical issues and they stay in crates. They need to be on crate confinement. Whatever the case is, they're taken care of first. Given walks, we clean their area, get them set up for the day. Usually they go outside during the day, or when we have the fearful ones, sometimes they stay in their crate until they're ready to interact more. And then we, give everybody their meds, whoever's on meds or whatever weirdness is going on at the time. And then we clean kennels, start with the dogs. That's usually a 2-person job. We kind of split it. That way it's not just this huge workload for one person. And then we do the cat room, and then we do the dishes, and then we take care of all of the other weird little stuff that happens. Um, Getting pictures of dogs, posting them for adoption, microchipping, updating vaccines, and then dogs come in throughout the day. So, you're pulled for 10 to 15 minutes to intake the dog, do a basic exam, get it vaccinated, find a place for it to go. And so, I mean, it's never exactly the same, but those are the main things. And that's kind of how our schedule works, is just take care of the animals first and try to do anything else that we can do in the afternoon. So we try to keep the animals all on a routine. They know when they're going to eat, they know when they're going to be locked inside so we can clean the outside. They know when they're going to be let out so we can clean the inside. And they know what to expect. And that's a big thing that we try to emphasize, is having a routine for them, and
Yeah.
creating some kind of normalcy in the chaotic environment that they're in.
Yeah. When I've been there, I mean, it's very rare I even can walk a dog without someone stopping and saying they found the dog, or any number of things. Wanting to drop off donations is great, or they're here to look for their dog, or all kinds of stuff. So it's like this constant interruption with things, and those aren't really emergencies, but I mean, usually you have some emergencies going on. I mean, last time I was there, there were some dogs that had been, what do you call it? Not confiscated, that's not the right word.
uh Seized.
Seized for attacking a neighbor dog. And then the other time, those 2 dogs came in because they had bit a FedEx person or something.
Oh yeah.
And of course, the little terrier thing was like the ring man, right? And the cattle dog that came in with was totally sweet.
Yes, the 9-pound Chihuahua Terrier, whatever that thing was the aggressor, of course.
Did they get reclaimed?
Still have the female and the little guy, a rescue took him. I'm like, hey, just so you know, he chased a FedEx driver and or a Walmart delivery is what it was.
Oh yeah,
And he did fight her. They were like, okay, well, it sounds like I kind of gave him the scenario and they were like, okay, we'll check him out. If it doesn't work out, we'll let you
that female was real sweet. So, I mean, it's just like this influx of, I've been there when you guys get animals hit by cars and eyes are falling out of their head and all kinds of things. So you do still get to practice your vet medicine.
I do, and I love that aspect of it as well. People are like, "How are you so excited by this?" I'm like, "But it's interesting. It sucks. It's sad. No animal should have to go through this, but you learn all these things, and you can help more animals. Like there are less things I need to send dogs to the vet for when they come in because I know how to deal with this now."
Yeah.
And so it's something that I've always loved was that medical aspect. I mean, we were younger. We had a cattle ranch and we did their vaccinations
Right.
and their antibiotics when they would get their, castrated and we did the branding and all of that stuff. And it always was just really cool to me. And so it's something that I've always just enjoyed.
I mean, it is fascinating and to watch you guys do this. I mean, it's just such a well orchestrated machine, actually, and how calm you guys are. I just stay out of the way because I won't be any help to you at all. It's very cool to watch. And, the dogs seem, even though they've been injured and stressed out, I mean, they're usually pretty tolerant. Not always, but usually, you know.
Yeah, for the most part. And I always a really interesting thing, dogs come in and they're really sick or they're injured or, they have some problem going on. And so they're really easy to deal with, whether they're in shock or they're just in pain. And then, they start to get better. And
Right.
you're like, oh my gosh, this dog is crazy. We have Saya who came in totally emaciated. She could barely even walk. She's the
Right.
sweetest dog. And now that she's healthy, she has so much energy and she needs so much work to be, calm and learn manners and all of this. So it's always interesting to see that change.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and they also change for the better there too. I mean, a lot of the dogs that come in that are really shut down and afraid. I mean, I think just because of the routine and like that interaction they have with you guys over time, they do definitely improve. Unless they're super severe. But a
Yeah,
lot,
and that routine of, they pooped outside and these weird humans are coming in and they're cleaning that up and then they're bringing me food and they're bringing me water or they're cleaning out the injury on my arm and like bandaging it up, whatever it is, they can definitely see that and that does change a lot of things for them.
let's talk a little bit more about our favorite subject, fearful and feral dogs. I mean, you started rehabbing fearful and feral dogs in the shelter when it belonged to the nonprofit. And I mean, basically the story is we had Nelson come out and do a workshop, and that accomplished many things because I had never, even though I had been in rescue for what, 10 years at that point, I'd never seen dogs like that. And I didn't know how to get them to walk on leash, how far to kind of push them without being too much. And a lot of them were within my comfort zone, but then a lot were not. So we had Nelson Hodges come out and do a workshop. I don't know how many people attended. I think like 18, and it was very kind of last minute. I think we planned it 6 weeks ahead of time or something. And Nelson came out and taught us how to help these dogs. And I mean, you kind of just ran with it. I don't think I've had to like do a whole lot after that to teach you anything. Um,
Definitely had questions. I've been like, hey, this is weird, what can I do here? So
well, and sometimes we just have to brainstorm because we have dogs that do things neither one of us has ever encountered, right? And it's like how to solve this problem. I mean, that's a lot of what you guys do up there is solve problems because one of the dog's behavior, but also kind of lack of supplies and resources. You have to be a little creative.
yes.
Um, So, but he came out and showed us a few things. And then after that, you kind of designed this protocol where you can rehab these dogs in a shelter environment. So tell a little bit about how you do that. First, we should say, how many feral dogs do you guys have at one time?
Mm, I mean, that depends. I would say maybe like 5 or 6
Yeah.
out of our 30-ish kennels is a safe number, and they're all usually at different stages of that. Some have been worked with, some haven't. But I would say that's a good number.
Yeah. I mean, so it's basically what, 10% of your population. So it's fair to say you have a lot of opportunity and a lot of practice.
Yes.
So go ahead and say like what you do when they first come in and then later.
So usually when they come in, they're being trapped by an animal control officer. And so when they initially come in, we don't really do anything with them. If they're the kind that are just kind of pancaking on the floor, then we'll vaccinate them just, for their safety. But if they're just completely thrashing and not, you know, gonna let us do anything with them, then they'll go straight into a kennel. Usually give at least a couple of days to decompress, get used to the noise and the smells and that routine that we establish. And after that, then so there's a couple of ways we do it, and it depends on the kind of room that we have. You can see I have my cleats back here. Um, so I really love to take a feral dog once they're kind of walking on a leash, at least a little bit, or they've gotten used to, that feeling around their neck. I like to start crate training. Basically, we just leave them in the crate when it's time to go out for a walk or go potty or do anything like that. They kind of learn to rely on us, that we're going to take them out to, use the bathroom or go smell some smells or whatever it is. And so they learn to walk on the leash much more reliably that way because they know what's coming. And then, as they earn the freedom or they feel more comfortable, then sometimes we'll let them hang out in the office a little bit and just get used to all the weird stuff that people are doing. Or we'll go on further walks or we'll let a volunteer walk them. And so it kind of depends on each dog and how they react to things. But first things first is always getting them on a leash and teaching them, we're going.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that was one of the things I was concerned about when we first started working with those dogs, especially the juvenile puppies, because they were wild. I mean, they were like a bucking bronco on those leashes. And, I was like, well, are they going to hurt themselves? Like, what's going to happen? Right. But I think what both of us learned was that we weren't really doing anything to them. Like, we were just standing there holding the leash and they were kind of flailing around, basically just trying to escape.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that kind of dog. And then there's the kind of dog that really just pancakes and like doesn't really want to move.
Mm-hmm.
I find those to be a little bit easier personally because it's not such a wild ride, right? Although they're both fun in their own way, but I think somehow leash training them and having them come out for their basic needs, right? And you guys giving them their basic needs and they're knowing that comes directly from you versus putting the food on the inside portion maybe, and then opening the guillotine door.
And it just appears there.
And it just appears, right? I think there's something to that, just earning a little bit of trust, but also the dog is learning the importance of people, because before these dogs have never had to depend on people for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly. I mean, some of them have probably been in homes before, but we don't really, like, we're never sure.
Yeah.
Usually you can kind of tell further along in their progression if they know like how a door works. I was
Yeah.
thinking, like with Toby, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure he's never been in a home because he doesn't understand when I open the door that he needs to go around it, like, to the opening. He wants to try and like go through the glass. So it's just these little things that they don't know if they've never gone through a door.
And even the simple things like where, if you have something in your hand while you have that leash in your other hand, they see that thing in your hand. They're like, what the heck is that? What's going on? I carry a trash bag through the room and just disrupt everybody's lives because
Right,
why is that huge thing moving?
right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's those tiny little things and them being inside the shelter. So the dogs are in the intake room or in the office. And so they're just getting to watch you guys without really much pressure to do anything else.
Yeah, I think it really helps them kind of realize like, oh, well, they're there. I'm not being killed or mauled or, nothing's happening to me. We're just here together. And I think that helps.
If you kept them in a larger run while you're trying to do this, do you think it would work as well? And why or
That's
why
a good
not?
question. It's definitely harder. The reason I like the crate is because they really can't do anything without us. In the kennels, they have the indoor area and they have the outdoor area. And so they have more space and, they have the option to like poop outside, pee outside, and then sleep inside. And they can kind of separate that. And I think the important thing about the crate is they can't they can't choose, okay, I need to go outside, so I'm just going to go out there. They have to really rely on us for that. And I think that's really what helps is they start to realize, okay, you're not just going to let me soil myself and live in it. You're going to take me out so that I can do this. And it's doable, but there is that trust thing is a lot easier to build, I think, when you know, they really just 100% have to rely on you.
Well, and they're probably getting handled a lot more too, right? Because you have to do that more often. You have to put a leash on them more often. So they're getting a lot of habit building in a positive sense.
Yes.
Versus like I'm just curious, we should do an experiment. Have like 3 inside and 3 in the runs. But when you go to leash them in the runs, of course they can move away from you and it
Mhm.
can be kind of an ordeal sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And
Um,
usually in the crate, you just got to kind of slip a leash over and they're not trying to climb the walls or, you
yeah,
know, whatever weird stuff.
yeah, hide inside and you have to crawl through the guillotine door and
Yeah.
some of them don't work or whatever. So once you move past that part, and I know, well, maybe I should say there were some rescues that had some certain requirements before they can take a dog, such as it has to be like friendly towards people or go up to a person or something like that. So is that the goals you're working towards?
Yeah, pretty much the things we really, before we let an animal leave, we want to make sure that whatever the normal human being is doing, like, not an animal professional, but just your everyday Joe walking outside, we want to make sure that the dog can tolerate that. Whether it's leaning on them because that's what kids do, they hug and they bug, or it's just, you know, coming up and interacting. What like all the little things. We want to make sure that they're okay with that stuff before we try to send them anywhere. There are some people who have the resources to take on a little bit more of that work so we can get them out a little bit sooner, but we do try to make sure that those are the things that they're able to tolerate before we try transferring them. So we want to build trust. We want them to be happy about human presence, walking on a leash normally, because
Mm,
how are you going to move the dog if it doesn't walk on a leash?
right,
So a lot of those things are the big things. If it needs to go to the vet, it needs to be okay with being handled enough to, get an exam, little things like that.
yeah. And I know I've had clients over the years that somehow find me that get feral dogs from either shelters or rescues. And I think they present them as just a little scared. and then they get the dog home and, you know, it just hides in a corner, or, I mean, it's a disaster, right? Because these people, the average person cannot rehab a feral dog. And they're just, first of all, there aren't enough trainers that really know how to do it. There's no books written about it. There's very few online resources about it. And fearful dogs are kind of the same, but kind of not. There's a little difference. Like if a dog's afraid but has been in a home or handled a lot, they're a little different, and they I don't know, the differences I see are they know they have to rely on a person for food, water, and shelter, and feral dogs don't. And then so these feral dogs almost, they're like, why should I follow you? I have no need for you. They don't like to be touched. They don't like to play with us. So it's like, it's a real, I mean, it's a fun challenge. Like, I love to figure out how to connect with these dogs, but your average pet owner cannot begin to solve these issues. And then there's all that stuff on the internet about, oh, you can't force them to do anything because then they're going to crumble and become terribly afraid and then start being fear aggressive. So that's kind of the process that I see, the warnings, right? To put fear in people's minds that these dogs are so fragile. And it drives me crazy, actually, because I know they're not. And so anyway, just tell me your thoughts on that.
I I do see that a lot. A lot of what I see is people think that petting the dog is going to make it more comfortable, and you can see the stress on the dog, you know. And the big thing I try to tell people is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because the dog is sitting there tolerating it doesn't mean that it enjoys it, and you're not getting anywhere. You're basically showing this dog, I'm bigger and I'm going to touch you and you're going to let me. And so where are you building trust? Um, and trying to explain, you know, sure, give it a little reassuring pat or a little pet, fine, but don't sit there and keep going and pushing its limits. You got to kind of understand what they're comfortable with. And that's something that I can also see, you know, even just the way I was before jumping into all of this was body language for dogs. You know, people don't realize you want a human to look at you when they're talking to you. You don't want, as a dog, for somebody to be staring at you. That's scary. That means something bad's probably going to happen. So, trying to get people to understand those little differences in the way animals communicate versus the way we communicate, that's the hardest part. And I think once you can get past that and really kind of, you know, throw everything you know about people out the window, then you can try to help dogs. But there's that fur baby mentality where, you know, they just want to be held and they just want to be loved. And that's not the case with a feral dog. Why would they want that? Like,
Or any dog.
yeah.
I mean, even the little dogs you get in, they're little survivors, you know, and they might want to be petted and all that stuff, but they also want to go do stuff, right? They want to
Yeah.
they want to be a dog even though they're like 5 pounds, right?
Yeah, they are animals. They want to do what is in their nature. They're not meant to sit in your purse and go with you to the mall or whatever you do.
All the malls up there in Las Vegas.
All the malls, yes.
Yeah, I've been talking to Kelly actually, and one thing she said about these dogs is that you get to see what a dog is without a human influencing the dog, which I think is very cool. And it's also made me really appreciate who they are more. And if you can appreciate a feral dog and see that dog's like motives and needs and what it wants to do, then you can help other dogs more, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting thing to try to explain to people too. When, you know, people ask, how do you do this? I'm like, you know, I just act more like a dog than a human. Like, gotta kind of meet them on their level and stop expecting them to meet you on your level because you have more of an understanding of what's going on here than they do. But they're not just gonna get it. There's this weird thing where people think, you know, if I pet it or if I, if I'm doing this, if I baby talk to it, it's gonna know that everything's okay. And that's not how dogs understand things. So
No, in fact, I think sometimes those things are so foreign to a feral dog that it scares them more.
yeah, it's like, why are they making these weird noises at me? Or why do they just keep reaching towards me? And like, what is going on? So I think it's a really funny thing to see a lot of other people do when they have a nervous dog or even when they're meeting a new dog. It's just such an interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of, if anyone's interested, they have an opportunity to do this in May at your shelter at the Fearful Feral Dog workshop I'm teaching. And you're going to help me with the hands-on portion. It's a super unique opportunity. I don't think this is going on anywhere else. I could be mistaken. But it's our 5th year now. So, it's really fun, and it gives people a chance to work with dogs they don't normally get to work with. And I hope they take back some things that will help them then in like their training business or rescue overall. We've had quite a bit of rescues come and honestly end up taking some dogs back too. So that's always great. But Bea helps me with that. So it's a good time. And I know there's been a couple dogs that I've gotten to watch, kind of progress the whole way. One is your dog, OG, which is amazing now. You'd never know what he was like when he started.
No, you really wouldn't. I mean, I tell people what he was like, and everybody's like, okay, yeah, right. There's no way that this dog who can be around kids and go to all these events was a completely feral dog. And so that's really cool. He's been with me, I think he's lived with me probably about 3 years now. But we still have our issues once in a while. He's one of those where I carry a watering can through the house and he's like, oh my gosh, what is that? What's going on? But in so many other ways, he's taught me so much about what I'm doing, but also, it's cool to know that I've also taught him just as much about living with people and that you can trust people. And
Yes, he likes it.
Yes, he loves it. Yeah. And I didn't expect him to enjoy going to these events so much. I started doing it to kind of break him out of his shell a little bit. Now, when we go somewhere, he is happier afterwards. He just has this confidence about him afterwards. Yeah, I did that. And, it's really cool. It's so cute. Like, I never expected that he would be so into going to like the Christmas carnivals with kids or like that, but he loves it. It's so funny.
Not that we recommend this with all feral dogs.
No, definitely not. He is really special. I mean,
but the possibility is there, right? And I mean, the dog I have, Tipton, he can go most places with me. Honestly, I slacked off and didn't take him to really busy places with people. So now we're doing that. I'm just like, dude, I'm sorry. I kind of didn't follow through. And now I moved out to the country. And so I'm taking him into town once a week. So we'll see where that goes. But he's terrified of kids. I would never make him, be social with a kid. It's just not something I even care to like tackle with him. Mm-hmm. So it all depends, this goes back to, right? All the dogs are individuals. So you have to meet them where they are and where their own comfort levels are. And I'm not saying they won't constantly progress through their life. They will, but not every feral dog's going to be an OG either.
No, definitely not. We've had some that, they still have a lot of tendencies that are really difficult to work through. And he has really been my experiment dog as well. And I kind of think that's what's made him so solid is all of my screw ups. He's kind of learned like, oh, okay, like I will be fine through whatever weird things happen. Because I did mess up a lot. He was one of the first really, really brutal cases that I dealt with. And I was told many times by my boss with the nonprofit, I think you should euthanize that dog. I don't think that dog is gonna, come out of this. I don't think we're gonna get anywhere with him. And maybe 6 months later, he was living in the office with us, like hanging out with everybody. But he was definitely a bite risk. He was brought in because he and who were assuming his brother were out in one of the rural ranch areas, and the farmer called because he was worried about his cattle. He felt like they were stalking his cattle. And so animal control went out, they trapped him, they brought him here. His brother was easy. His brother came out of it pretty quickly. It took maybe 2 months, and he was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm a family dog now. So he got adopted. We sent him to another rescue in northern Colorado, and I mean, he found a great home with kids, and they loved him. They were super excited. They found out he had a brother that was still at the shelter, and they were interested. And I was like, no, I don't think that this is a good idea. When I would start working with Ode, he did not like anybody. He would growl at me. He would kind of give me that hard stare of like, get away. I don't want to deal with this. And the first couple of times I went to leash him, he would kind of snap, and he didn't want that thing on his neck. He didn't want me reaching for him. And so I would block myself with our little beds that we have here at the shelter to get him on that leash. And then we'd start walking, and he was not one of those that would pancake and, make it real easy to teach him. He was alligator rolling and like jumping in the air, slamming himself against the sides of the building. Like you said earlier, we weren't doing anything. We were literally just holding the leash, and he was doing all of this stuff, just trying to get away. We were going back to his kennel, and he jumped, he hit the side of the building, and then he just laid there. I was like, oh my goodness, we killed him. Like, what happened? He broke his neck. I'm panicking. I told one of the other girls I worked with, go get me a bowl of water and a syringe. I'm just gonna put some water in his mouth, get him to like, do something, make sure he's alive here. And I don't know if maybe he just panicked and just gave up or what he was doing, but I had to pick up this 60-pound feral dog and carry him back to his kennel because he would not move. I was really hesitant to get him out and do this again, but I did, because it was that or we just euthanized him. But the whole time I saw something in his eyes, even when he was growling, even when he was snapping, like I just saw something in him by everybody telling me like, you need to euthanize that dog. I was like, no, we will not euthanize this dog. We're gonna try this. Worst thing that happens is it doesn't work out, but we have the time, we have the resources to work with him. Let's try it. And it took about a year before I was even able to touch him. And then probably a few more months, and I started testing, like picking him up and seeing how that was going to go. And he would growl and he would snap a little bit. And so I was like, okay, he needed it because he needed vaccines. He needed to go to the vet. There are things that had to happen. So I kind of pushed those boundaries a lot with him. Like I said, he was my experiment dog. So I kind of just saw what I could get away with or how I could earn his trust enough to do the things that needed to be done, like pulling out a splinter out of his paw or anything like that. A year and a half later, we got to the point where everybody was like, okay, I think we can transfer him to another rescue to be put up for adoption. And I was like, no, let's wait one more round, because we were doing this every few weeks.
Yeah.
And so I said, let's hold off this time. I don't know if he's ready. And really it was me who was not ready. And so the next time came around, and we were creating our list, and I would make that whole list for the transfers and then just kind of get feedback from everybody on what they saw in each dog. And I didn't put him on the list, and they asked me why. And I was like, I guess I could. And I was about to write his name, and my eyes just welled up with tears. And I was like, I can't imagine him going anywhere or being with anybody else. Like, I just felt like we had already been through so much together, and I wanted to like keep going and see him progress. And I was the only one who he was really, really close with, who could just do whatever I wanted with him, pick him up. So Tony, my fiance, was working with me at the time, and I was really working to convince him, let's take him home, let's do this. And he was like, look, dude, I don't want to take home a dog that is not going to be like good with me. I don't want to take home an aggressive dog.
Right.
he's not. He'll be okay. Like he's living in the office. He'll get used to you. Like you're just tall and you just have this demeanor. He just needs to learn to trust you. So I got him to kind of work with him a little bit more. And then, finally did the whole crying, I want to bring him home thing. And it worked. So yeah, OG came home with us and he's this dog who would like go mark desks and stuff in the office. Never once peed inside my house. We created him for maybe about a week. And then I started kind of pushing that boundary and seeing what we could do. And he never needed a crate. He never used the bathroom in the house. Didn't mess with our cats ever. They would mess with him and he would look at me like, ah, help. But it was never an issue. And I think he really just had that bond with me and he knew, that if something got messed up, that he couldn't have that anymore. And so I think that's really what helped with him. But now I take this dog everywhere with me. He has great recall. I can have him off leash almost anywhere. I won't because I'm paranoid and I see the crazy that goes on in this town with all the stray dogs. But it's possible, at least when we're like on our property. I practice with him, and it's something I never thought would be possible. It's just getting him to trust me enough that he wanted to be with me. And I love that dog so much. I think he's like just the epitome of everything that I have learned rolled up into one.
He is. He's awesome. And when you were like, yeah, I want to bring him to the Christmas carnival, I'm like, okay. But he was fine.
Yeah, he just sits in his bed. You set him up a little place, and I've never taught him like place or anything like that. I've taught him to sit down and to shake my hand because it's cute. And, people like to do that. So, but other than that, I haven't really taught him much other than like, building confidence, getting up onto big rocks in the mountains or some of that stuff. I never worked on place, but you put something down and he knows that's where he belongs and he'll sit there. Like inevitably, it's the funniest thing. Like you don't have to stay there, but like he finds his little spot and he makes that a safe place and he's good there.
I think the dogs in New Mexico have a better genetic makeup, temperamentally wise, than dogs that I see in rescue in other areas. That's one thing I love about doing rescue here is that I can walk into a shelter if I have a space in the, to pull a dog, and I have way too many to choose from, right? And that's the hard part, right? Is leaving some behind. But in Virginia, you could go to, in the metro areas, you could go to the like 3 shelters and not find one that I would, that meet my requirements, what I want to pull for rescue, which is like a safe, friendly dog, basically, and stable. So I think like genetically, we get to work with some really great dogs. They just have crappy environments.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really good point too, like the whole genetic thing. It's this area, if you're not, dogs who misbehave with their families or have these weird tendencies, they get thrown out and they don't, they get dumped somewhere or whatever happens. And so I think that kind of weeds out a lot of that stuff. I mean, we still have that, it happens, but it's not as common as I see, these doodles that have all of these crazy issues. Like it's not something I see as much. It's really, really rare to have a dog who I'm really worried about.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been a few cases that we've talked about, but they're kind of few and far between, honestly. For as many dogs as you have coming from really bad situations, I mean, they're very resilient dogs. And even staying at the shelter for, how long was Toby there? 9 months? Being there for that long, a lot of dogs would go like kennel crazy and stuff, but I don't see that happening in the large numbers that I see elsewhere.
No, not as much. And I do see it in certain breeds. Like sometimes when we get any like bully breeds, pitties, anything like that, like they're either okay where they are for however long, or they go crazy within a month.
Mm.
And that's a really good way to kind of judge it. German Shepherds are another one. They struggle so bad in the shelter. And I've never had one here for more than a month that's like good that whole time. that is one breed that just has a really hard time.
Yeah.
But other than that, our New Mexico brown dogs, they're pretty stable in this environment. They really are. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I mean, it's sad, right? That they have to be there for so long, but then on the other hand, well, if they have to be there, they're like mentally healthy.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the other thing we look at as well, you know. We don't want a dog to have to stay here for a really long time, but if it does, is it doing okay? Is it thriving compared to where it was before, or is it just constantly, you know, running up the walls and breaking its nails on everything and barking at everybody? Because the kennel stress is it's real, it's a real thing, and it can either kind of make or break what a dog outcome is going to be.
And I know like COVID was probably a great time, right? Because everyone was adopting dogs and then it just stopped. Where are you guys now with like being able to transport dogs out? I mean, I'm up there all the time, but we don't talk about this stuff.
Yeah,
Talk about the
we
dogs.
talk about the dogs. It's honestly transfers are not happening.
Yeah.
Once in a while we'll talk to one of our shelters that we have a good relationship with, and they'll say, I have room for maybe two, or we don't have a lot right now. And so they'll take one or two from us. But the only things we're able to get out right now are cats, surprisingly, which was really hard before COVID. And now that's like everybody wants cats. But puppies are easy to get out because we work with a puppy rescue and they come down once a week, take what they can, and we do that weekly. But large adult dogs just are so stuck. Nobody wants to take dogs right now. Every shelter I talk to, they're full. They're struggling with the same thing we are, getting more in than they are getting out. And
Yeah.
so it's not possible for pretty much anybody at this point.
I mean, a lot of the dogs that you have are very like cool looking dogs. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people pick a dog by the way it looks.
Mhm.
And they also happen to be nice too, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of husky mixes going on up there. So sometimes dogs will have like one blue eye, which people like, and
Mhm.
stuff like that. And that cute little chow mix puppy that you have, oh my gosh. At any normal time, those dogs would be adopted, right?
Mhm.
But it just hasn't been happening. So, and you made a decision to basically stop intake and cut down on the hours a lot because otherwise it would be like a revolving door of euthanizing dogs and just taking in more.
Yeah, and there's a few struggles that come with that. So initially we limited our intake because I was handed the shelter and told, good luck, you know what we need and you know how to set everything up. So there you go. And so I told everybody, we can't just keep taking and taking and taking. Like we don't have vaccinations, we don't have beds, we don't have the basic necessities, we don't have a steady flow of dog food yet, which is still a struggle. It was really hard to make sure that everybody had what they needed. And then there were two people working here. So we couldn't take in 10, 15 dogs a week. That was crazy. There was nowhere for them to go, nobody to deal with them. Like it wasn't possible. Now we have more staff, but our issue is we don't have our facilities euthanasia license. And that's something I've been struggling for almost a year trying to figure out how to get with all of the weird stuff that we have going on. It's myself and one other staff member. We're certified. We can do it, but the facility doesn't have the license to order the drugs and do all of that.
Oh, I see.
So our vets, they will euthanize injured or very sick animals or aggressive dogs, but they will not euthanize, your typical happy, healthy, adoptable dog. I have no interest in euthanizing dogs for space that are good, happy
Right.
dogs. So that's been my one thing is if it comes to that point, I won't stick around as much as I want to help. It's just, I don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
But also the vets aren't going to do that. So right now we're kind of in limbo trying to figure out what we're going to do because we can't move them. There's still dogs that need to come in. So we're really stuck right now trying to figure that out. And it's discouraging to know, we've been here almost 2 years and there's still so many things that I'm trying to like get done and figure out. And I have to not be so hard on myself because I also know for a majority of that time, I've just been trying to keep things, keep our heads above water, make
Exactly.
sure the animals are taken care of, do the paperwork and all of the other stuff that comes in, make sure we have dog food and vaccines and things like that, which was a whole struggle, as you know. It's hard. I'm the only person who really knows what we need and what avenues we can get it. And I have to struggle with the city's procurement processes and the way they purchase things and all of that to try to make it all kind of work together. It's been really hard.
Yeah.
It's been crazy.
From my point of view, and I don't know all that you go through, but I mean, I think with what you were handed, you've done an amazing job. And basically not even knowing how the government works. I mean, you've had to learn more about that, how to work with this within the city's policies than the dog part. You already knew that.
And that's been the hard part. I know what the dogs need, I know what to do, but how to get that under our current situation.
I had like an unlimited supply of money. Of course, I would just hire someone to fix everything that needs to be done at that shelter. Hopefully they're getting a new one. So, but that's gonna take some time.
Yeah, it's probably a minimum of 2 years before we have a new building. So
Yeah.
gotta
So
figure out how to make it work for the time being. We go to the bathroom and cry, a couple times a week, but then we come out and we get the job done. So we're doing okay.
yeah, this may sound crazy, but why do you guys work there? I mean, because a lot of people, even with volunteering for rescue or fostering like one dog, they're like, oh, I couldn't do that. It's too hard. I couldn't stand them leaving me, or I would want to keep them all. And I'm like, that's a lot of focus on you, right? What is it gonna do to you? And for me personally, it's what can I do for those dogs and cats in your case, and then you get so much back. For me personally, that's what keeps me going. But I don't work where you work, and I often leave going, oh my gosh, and like I don't
Me
know.
too. I mean, even last night, I got out of work and I went home and I just laid down and I just sat there thinking, like, what the heck am I doing? Like, why am I putting myself through this? But somebody has to. Many people who, like you said, they can't do it because it would hurt them or, this. And it's hard and it's heartbreaking, but you're also doing so much good. And I would rather me be doing it than somebody who doesn't have the animal's best interest in mind. And also, I have that understanding that dogs are dogs and they're not people. So they need all of the stuff that people don't understand. Even on the hardest days, I can look at Molly, who's sitting here in the office right now, and say, okay, that is why I'm doing this, because this dog would never have had a chance if I wasn't here. She would have been euthanized, our little feral office dog right now. See the medical cases come in and they're like struggling to survive and being able to help them. That is why I do it. Even my staff, they come in and some people, they make it for a couple of days and
Fun.
they hit that point and they're like, you know what, I can't do this.
Yeah.
A lot of people think it's just cuddling puppies and kittens and, whatever. And it's not, it's sad. We get a lot of cruelty cases in. I do it because I know I can help. Like I said, I wanted to be a vet. I wanted to help animals. And then I jumped into this and saw that there was so much more I could be doing for animals. And I fell in love with rescue. I fell in love with taking in those dogs who have had horrible, horrible lives before and showing them something completely different. And, you can't help them all, but the ones that you can help, and even the ones that you can't, you're able to show them something better than what they've had before. And I think that keeps me going. And I think that keeps all of us going.
I mean, just to think like all the dogs that have come in that shelter that have been severely fearful or feral probably would have been euthanized. I think it's pretty safe to say, Tipton being one of them. And then what these dogs end up like giving us. I have someone that's actually coming to the workshop that has a fearful dog, and she wrote me a really long email about like her struggles through having cancer, and they got this fearful dog. They didn't know what they were in for. But then at the end of the day, that dog helped her through all of her chemo and stuff, because I mean, she had to kind of focus on him, almost worry about him and try and help him more than, I think it was a distraction of some sort, but yet she's gained a lot through helping him through his process, like for her personally. I found that to be true for me as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think there is a little dopamine rush at like each little success. That dog takes its first little step forward, or
Mhm.
you see like some little connection made with that dog that will help it progress, and I'm like, yes, but you can't like be excited because then you'll scare them, of course. You just have
Yeah,
to internally like, oh, good job, buddy. I would love to have like a fearful feral dog center up there because there seems to be no shortage of them.
definitely not. Nope.
You took us around a tour of the city. We saw probably 15 or so just on that given day, and you said it was kind of a slow day. There's definitely a lot of dogs up there that could use help, and also, I mean, the situation in those neighborhoods, I would imagine the people aren't too happy either. I mean, you couldn't even like walk your own dog safely.
Exactly. It's a mess. Honestly, it's so overwhelming to look around and see, we took in, I think, 55 dogs in March,
Wow.
and you can't even see a difference.
Right.
It's, seeing our numbers and then seeing what's still out there.
Is 92% like the magic live release rate to say you're a no-kill shelter?
I can't remember if it's between 90 to 92%, but it's around there. Yeah.
So do you think that's a realistic goal?
I do actually. It's it's really hard for a shelter, like a municipal shelter or one that's obligated to take in animals. You constantly have animals coming in and they're not getting out fast enough. And so you do have to euthanize for space in a lot of these areas. We've been lucky. We have not been forced into that yet, but we are quickly filling and finding less and less options for our animals. So there's a huge chance that it could get to that point. It is realistic. When I look at, the percentage of dogs that I would say should be euthanized and not released from a shelter, it's usually about 6-7%. And that's dogs who have killed other dogs or, other animals, dogs who have medical issues that can't be helped,
No.
dogs who are just super aggressive with people, or other dogs have a history of like chasing and biting people, stuff like that. That makes sense to me. Big thing we have to focus on is the safety of our community. And would you feel comfortable with your kid or even yourself and your dog being out with this dog in the street? If the answer is no, then you need to make the responsible decision and euthanize that dog. And that changes. Sometimes you're going to get a ton of cases of aggressive dogs, and that number is going to dip low. But I do think that that is a very, very good number to kind of work off of and a
Yeah.
goal to have. And well, it's not always possible. But I think in March, our live release rate dipped down to 89%. And that was because we got an influx of dogs who killed other dogs, or, things like that happened, and we were not going to release them back into the community. It's a hard standard to keep up when you're dealing with so many things like that. I think it's doable if you have the resources to get the animals out.
I'm lucky because I can choose which dogs I take into the rescue. So occasionally we take in like an owner surrender or something that I'm like, I don't know about this. You guys will have to see. And sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it's not. But it's like once every couple years.
Mhm.
We're not a open intake to the community. And I do think it's important, one reason why I started volunteering up there is you guys do keep those dangerous dogs from going back into the community. And especially where you live, it's a small one.
Mhm.
So like if you adopted out some aggressive dog to someone, you probably would hear about it.
Yeah, we'd probably see it again.
Whereas in a larger city, you may never, if there's 10 million people in that city, you're not gonna like see that dog again, possibly. But even just putting those dogs into homes, even if you find that needle in the haystack, right? That person that lives alone, that doesn't have visitors and doesn't have any other pets, bad things always happen. And those dogs, either escape, get out, like the pet sitter forgets to close a gate, or
Mhm.
I mean, just crazy stuff.
Or at some point that dog needs to go to the vet
Right.
and can't be seen. So what do? You can't euthanize it to put it out of its suffering. You can't get it basic medical care. I always tell people, and I especially tell our fosters, but people who adopt, we want to make sure that the dog we find is going to be a dog that fits into your lifestyle well and isn't just going to turn everything upside down, but also a dog that's safe for you to be able to take to the vet. Not just for you and for the community, but for the dog. Because again, what are you going to do if you have a dog that can't go to the vet because it's trying to bite everybody or, attack everybody, and it's just going to suffer? So we have to kind of take all of that into account.
Yeah, I actually had that one interesting case here. I don't even know how the lady got the dog into her courtyard. I think a family member brought her from the res, completely feral dog. She did like this lady, but the lady could never touch her. She lived there for years, could never touch her, and she wasn't leash trained. And I'm not placing any blame on this woman. She actually did love this dog. She just didn't have the resources. Kind of luckily, when that dog was older, it escaped. And then somehow she contacted me and we went and got the dog and eventually got it in a crate and took it back to her house. And then the lady kind of kept in touch and I tried to leash train the dog, but man, it was a tough one. I mean, she was like 10 by then and had never had a leash on her. So it's going to be a struggle. And she was a cattle dog. I love that dog though. She was awesome. But the dog started to get sick and she wasn't feeling herself. And I could see the decline happening. I didn't know if the dog terminally ill or just there was something that could be fixed, but we couldn't even begin to take that dog to the vet because it couldn't walk on a leash. And so we tried various things and eventually we got some trazodone from the vet. But by that time the dog was on her way out and we actually got her in a crate and took her to the vet. She was able to pass peacefully with her owner and the lady could actually touch her. She's like, I so badly want to pet her. And she finally could. In a way, that's what happens if you adopt hound dogs. They can't walk on a leash and stuff, at the end, it could be very agonizing for the people because they have to watch the dog just suffer instead of take it to the vet and get either medical care or humane euthanasia. So I was glad I could help her. She was older and she couldn't have lifted the dog by herself or anything like that. So it's interesting how people find resources sometimes. How that lady found me was interesting. And that's the fun of living here in New Mexico. Like things happen like that I swear they don't happen in like suburban Virginia.
What is this place?
I'm constantly like, wow, this is crazy, but at the same time, it's interesting and you get to help a lot of people and dogs. So anything else you want to add, my dear?
No, I think we covered a lot.
I need to ask you the final question. What have dogs taught you?
Ooh, that's a hard one to answer without just going off on a whole other tangent. I mean, they've taught me a lot. The biggest thing I think dogs have taught me working in the shelter is that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be through the struggles and all the chaos that I kind of dealt with over the last couple of years. The resentment from people I knew before with this transition happened for me taking this job. None of it mattered because I'm here for the dogs. They've taught me to be more confident in myself. They've taught me to manage my own emotions and be patient. Another huge thing they've taught me is to live for the moment and to heal. It's so cool to see dogs don't hang on to things the way that people do. And he's just taught me, that I can feel what I'm feeling, but I don't need to hang on to it forever. It helps me in my everyday life, whether I'm struggling at work or struggling with something going on at home. I kind of think about it. Remember, you don't have to sit in that mindset all the time. You can get through pretty much anything because the things I've seen some of these dogs get through it's crazy and it's horrific, and they act like they don't even remember. Violet's a good example. She was almost starved to death and you would never think that she came from such a horrible situation. She's resilient, and so they've just taught me that I'll be okay pretty much no matter what. And then I can help them by taking all of this that I've learned and just continuing to learn.
Dogs don't wallow in self-pity. It is, I mean, visiting a shelter is always sad in some sense, but in another, to me, like those dogs, and this shelter gets in a lot of really bad cruelty cases, hoarding cases, abuse cases, a lot. I think per capita than other places. And just to see those dogs like rise, right? Like the Phoenix, it gives me inspiration every day. And you do too, my darling.
We blush again.
Bea is like this little, beacon in the darkness sometimes. And I really appreciate everything that you do. And I think a lot of people, you inspire a lot of people through that workshop that come and see what you do. They're always commenting about how great you are.
Thank you. Well, I will say you have been a huge factor in why I have kept going here for so long. So
Yeah.
it's been awful at times, but I think the network that I was able to grow with you and the people I've met and all of this stuff in combination, it's been helpful. And
Yeah.
I don't think I could have done it without the support of you and all of the nonprofit friends of just everybody who's jumped in to say like, hey, I know you're struggling, but you're doing great. So
And your mom and Juan and Heather and Darren. There is a really good support network. And I think I just was able to expand it to more people, which I was happy to do because I want to help the shelter too. And those dogs, and they deserve it. Well, thank you for joining me.
thank you for having me.
Thanks to Bea for taking time out of her busy day to join me for this podcast. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys got something out of it and also can kind of have a glimpse into how rural shelters are in America still. When I moved to New Mexico, I was absolutely floored by the condition of the shelters, the lack of resources. And it's not that the people here don't want to do better, they do. But there is a lack of funding and a lack of interest in general about shelters here and animal care. And I think it's a shame, but I'm glad to see people like Bea stepping up and trying to help out. Next time, I'm going to have Valerie Ann Irwin on my podcast, and we're going to talk about Lima. Valerie and I were both on the Lima work group for the International Association of Canine Professionals last year when we had Stephen Lindsay do a certification course for the IACP. And we're going to talk about what we learned by being on that work group together. So I hope you'll join me. If anyone would like more information about courses I offer, workshops, online learning, etc., please go to my website, Heart to Heart Canine, HART, number 2, HEARTCANINE.com. Thanks for listening and hope to see you again next time.